Clemence Michelon. Welcome to the conversation.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
I was saying before we started recording officially, I'm so excited to have you here because I'm like, I feel like you're just amazing, brilliant, and I just can't wait to talk to you. So we're here.
Well, thank you so much. That's really kind. That makes me very happy. And what a great way to start the day. It's 9 a.m. where I am, and I don't think I could be starting the day on a better note.
I think it's a perfect way. Start the day with praise. I think that's the way to
Yes,
start it.
yes. We should all be so lucky.
We should. So Clemence, like my first question for you is, 'cause when I was thinking about when I first discovered you with the Quiet Tenant in 2023, and I wanted to ask you, how have you managed the success of the Quiet Tenant? Because no one can ever be prepared for that.
Well, thank you. That's first of all, that's a very kind question,
Thank you.
and it's an interesting topic. I mean, generally speaking, I am just thrilled and delighted and grateful. And I think
Mm.
that's the part that, and I'm so happy that I kind of can't believe it's real. So in a weird way, it I kind of become anxious. Like I don't want to be too happy because who knows what's going to happen, you know? That's great, which is a great way to exist. No, I'm just
Yeah.
kidding. But you know, it's a wonderful thing to have had happen, and then in the way that it sort of correlates to the rest of the work, going from publishing The Quiet Tenant, which kind of changed my professional life,
Mm.
um, and was a very lucky experience in many ways. When the time came to write the next book, what I kept reminding myself is I think a second novel is always going to come with a lot of big feelings
Yeah.
because if the first one works well and finds its readers, then there are going to be questions like, is the next one going to do as well? Is it, are the readers going to be as happy with it? Which
Mm.
are great problems to have, but it is a form of pressure. Some of it self-inflicted. But I feel like if the first one doesn't find its readers and if it doesn't work out the way you want it to, then I think you would feel like the next one is your last chance, which is also a
Yeah.
huge form of pressure. So either way, I think a second novel is going to involve some deep breaths, some processing, uh, some therapy, maybe, whatever it takes to kind of free the brain so it can do its work.
But it's not easy because I remember that's writing that second novel. It's the expectations you have is that you're never prepared for them. Because I remember sitting there thinking at this same desk, thinking, "How am I going to do this again?" Because I know people like the first one. It's not as if It's not as if you can't write. You know you can write, and you know you can tell a story. But it's a different kind of pressure on you because it's other people's expectations you put on yourself.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm sure you found that too, but the second novel is the first one usually you write with sort of metaphorically speaking other people in the room with you,
Mm,
right?
yeah,
The first one, I wrote it, like dance like no one is watching. I wrote like no one was ever going to read it, which was very liberating. And it was hard when working on the second one to convince myself that it was going to be the case. And eventually I got, to kind of convince myself to write like no one was going to read, which I think is the only way to write well.
yeah.
And eventually I got there, but I certainly had to recondition myself.
Yeah, you had to. It was like training. I had to talk to myself a lot and go through like
Mm.
this reprogramming to say, you can write this book. You have a plan,
Yes.
you know what your story is, just write the book and ignore the fact that it's just the first time you're writing under contract, which is a different kind of pressure also because you don't have that pressure with the first book.
Exactly. And but also I think the goalpost moves. So I think that the another part of it that can be tricky, maybe you found that too, but when I was writing The Quiet Tenant, it was so
Mm.
early in my career that the mere fact that I was writing it all was the whole battle. I wasn't trying to write
Yeah.
well. I was trying to write. Writing 500 words a day made me feel amazing. And now the goalpost has moved. I feel like, oh no,
Yeah.
I should be writing better, or 500 words, that's nothing, we should be doing more, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So the standards just move with it. So I think that that's also a big part of it.
Yeah. So who was Clemence Michelon before the Quiet Tenant? Who were you?
Let's see. Can I remember her? um, let's see. I wrote The Quiet Tenant and started working on it in 2020. So at that time, I had been in the US for 6 years, just 6 years. That's wild to think about. I had been in the
Yeah.
US for 6 years. I was born and raised in France, and I came to the
Mm.
US in July of 2014. So it had been 6 years, and I was working full time as a journalist at a newspaper called The Independent, which you
Which
are
we
British, so
know.
you will know it. Uh,
We know the
it's
Independent.
occurring to me as I say this. Usually in the US, I have to like introduce it a little bit
They're
more
like,
because
who? What? We're
a
like,
lot.
yeah, no. The Independent is one. It's one of ours. We know it. We'll take it.
A lot of people in the US know it, but I still have to. Some people don't, so I have to like introduce it.
Yeah.
You know, you're in the UK. So I was a journalist at the Independent. I wrote about culture and entertainment, and just also people with interesting lives. I was someone who read a lot. I read a lot of crime novels, but also just a lot of books in general.
Mm.
And I also had a pre-crime novel. I wrote a novel in French that was not a thriller,
Oh, you
and
did.
I did, and it was a very different experience. It was a literary novel about a female bodybuilder who has to manage her sister's bakery for a few weeks, and it ruins her life basically because she's about to have this big competition and she can't train for it while also managing a bakery, and it blows her life apart. And so that book came out in September of 2020, actually, with a small, very small independent feminist press based out of
Mm.
Paris. And so when I started working on The Quiet Tenant, I also had sort of that first experience of publishing
Yeah.
fiction, which was very, very helpful because it just convinced me on a small scale, but it did show me that I could write fiction that could mean
Yeah.
a lot to a smaller number of people. But you know, the first time you feel like you've touched a reader, like you've moved them, it's a very powerful thing.
Mm. Did you know you could tell stories before that though? Before writing that first novel? Because I would say, because being a journalist, obviously you're a writer and you can write, but being a
Yeah.
storyteller, I think it's a different thing. So when did you know you could do that?
You know, that's such an interesting question. I think that I've always been interested in like the ability to tell stories,
Yeah.
and um, I get very frustrated in a group when someone starts telling a story and it becomes apparent that they don't know how to do
It's
it.
like they don't know how to end it. Or they don't know,
Yeah,
or
yeah, yeah, yeah.
there's a lot of build up and then it just
Yes,
nothing happens. You're like, well,
nothing
where's the
happens. I know. And I always feel like before I tell a story in a group, I kind of like run through it in my head, and
yeah,
I'm like, this will be the beginning, this will be the middle, this will be the payoff, this will be the end.
yeah.
And you know, yeah. So I've always had like this awareness of storytelling in various contexts.
Mm,
I also think living in the US, it's amazing how much of like entertainment programming is about storytelling. You know, the late night
yeah,
shows, all about sit
yeah,
down, tell a couple stories. I find that fascinating. And so you quickly kind of learn, you know, to always have like an ear for it. I do
yeah.
remember when I was a kid, for some reason, I have a memory of sitting with my parents and my sister on a sleeper train. It was just the four of us. And maybe because the light was off, I felt liberated in the dark. And I like started making up this story and telling it to them. And it made no sense. A fact that I was gently informed of by my sibling. But but it was so fun, and I never forgot that moment. And you know, there were a lot of moments when I just became aware of the power of telling stories. Like there was a this program at my school where every once in a while in the afternoon, this was primary school, elementary school
Mm,
in France, a woman would come and just tell stories, like tell us stories. And there would be like sort of fairy tales and stuff. And I remember she always braced herself before she did this, and she like arranged her bangs. And and if you're listening on audio, I'm bringing my hand to my forehead and composing myself. And she would take a deep breath and sort of like brace herself for the story. And it was kind of amazing to have this performance of a story.
Yeah.
But, and then of course, so journalism meant I learned to kind of take all I had been sort of confusingly aware of in terms of storytelling and put it into a proper story with a structure, beginning, middle, and a point, right? In journalism, you quickly
Mm.
learn a story has to have a point. And you better get to it quickly, because it's
We
journalism, you know.
It's the same
Uh,
thing when I'm teaching advocacy to the law student or the trainee solicitors or the trainee lawyers, and I'm teaching them about doing a closing speech. I always say to them, there has to be a point to it. It can't just be you just telling a story, just trying to you just want them to do something. You need to ask yourself, what is the overall point to it? And so it's interesting. There's so
yeah.
many professions where it's communication. You always have to ask yourself, what is the point?
What is the point? And
Mm,
it's always straddling the line between this wider point, but the specificity of the example you are giving. If you read the New
yeah,
Yorker, an article will always try to make a point about social security in Sweden and how it compares to here. But then the story
yeah,
will be about like Johan, who moved from Sweden to the US and had this chronic
yeah.
condition. It's the universality of the specific. And that's very important to understand.
Mm. Do you think about did you realise that was gonna be like a component of your own writing? Like writing your novels?
Oh yes. You mean the stuff about stories
Yeah.
and yeah. Oh, for sure.
Mm,
Yes. I always to a degree, I mean, in fiction, right? I don't write with a point in mind
yeah.
necessarily, but I do think that no choice in storytelling is neutral. So I always have the bigger picture in mind, and I try to make choices that make sense for me and are meaningful to me.
Mm. So when you look back at your publishing journey in France, and then I'm saying the publishing journey of which starts with The Quiet Tenant, how do the two like compare? Because obviously it prepared the French publishing journey prepared you, but is it completely different in comparison?
Yeah, it was very different, both structurally and just in terms of scale. I wrote
Mm.
The Quiet Tenant in English, so my home market now as an author is the US. And it's funny, like when The Quiet Tenant was published in France, it was like a foreign deal, even though it's also
Yeah, God, it would have
a
been.
home market. Yeah, and I had a translator. I didn't translate it into French myself. So that was, and it was a great experience. We worked really well together. I was very grateful, and I think it was a good experience for her as well, my translator. But what was interesting is, in terms of career stuff, almost everything was different. In terms of internally, how I wrote the story, how I worked on it, how I related to it, it was
Mm.
very similar. Like it was the same person writing a story. It just was introduced to the world on a different scale. So, but also structurally speaking, in France, literary agents are becoming more common. But generally speaking, if you're a newcomer, you're not going to have one. So it was me
Yeah.
sending my manuscript to publishing houses. I like just directly in the US, whereas in the US, you would have your literary agent and then they would handle the submission to editors at publishing houses. I know you know this. I'm saying this in case
Yeah.
anyone listening doesn't know. Uh,
No, but I think
and
I had an author from Finland. God, her name's escaped me, but it was the same. Like they have very few, if any, agents. So that when they're submitting, they're submitting directly to publishers.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So various countries work kind of in different ways. So first of all,
Mm,
structurally, it was different, but then also the scale, right? Like I was very happy when The Quiet Tenant happened that I had had that experience, that it wasn't entirely my first experience publishing fiction. And I also had published one short story in France. And
yeah.
so just these little steps meant that I was able to kind of handle when I got this deal with my US publishing houses Canap. I love them. And then we had like 30 plus foreign deals. And it just kind of was this extraordinary summer in my professional life. It was wild and I enjoyed it. And I was able to enjoy it because I
Were
had put
you?
out work.
Oh,
Oh yeah, I enjoyed everything.
I
It was
think I went into
there was
shock.
yes. Did you? What
I
was
went
it
into
like for you?
shock. Yeah, I wasn't. I don't think I took it on an emotional level because there was a lot of things happening with that first book. It was a lot of things happening in a short space of time, and it was like I put the phone down, and as soon as I put the phone down, I get another email from the agent talking about another deal, and you're like, this is it's a lot that is happening. So my only way to cope with it was just to like cut myself off like emotionally, which is why I always talk about having like a breakdown in the park at a festival in the summer with my best friend, like crying at 11 o'clock at night. She's like, why are you crying? I'm like, it's just a lot.
Well, and it's so much because you've been waiting for it. You've been hoping, but you never
Yeah,
exactly know what you're hoping for. So I don't know
that's the
about
thing.
you, but I had this feeling of like my dream was to publish a book in English. But then
Mm,
things started happening to me that if I had, a big part of being a writer is to manage your expectations.
yeah.
And if I had dreamed of what was happening to me, I would not have been doing a very good job of managing my expectations. So, like it was kind of surpassing the dream, which is wild. I did have one physical reaction to it. Well, two. One, I do think I almost got an ulcer, a stomach ulcer. I remember being
God,
like, "Woo, we need to like stop taking ibuprofen on an empty stomach because things are feeling a little
you need, we
intense."
need natural remedies now. You need to
Yeah,
drink milk.
we're gonna take some, but it was more out of excitement than anything. And then the
Yeah.
second I remember, this is the only time in my life this happened to me, but I'm a runner and I would go on runs and I was so excited and pumped, chock a block full of adrenaline that I would hyperventilate
Oh
while
wow.
running. Yeah, I would start hyperventilating. And so I would have to like stop running and just breathe. When you hyperventilate, you can breathe between your hands to sort of simulate the
Yeah.
whole paperback aspect. And I remember I had to do that, but it didn't feel bad. It was almost just like I was on a roller coaster,
It's an
And
adrenaline rush.
yeah, it was a complete adrenaline rush. That fall, I ran my fastest marathon that I've ever run. It was like strange actually because physically speaking, I had never run this fast. I have not run this fast since. I almost thought, did I miss a part of the course? And
You've
someone
missed
else
a
made that
lap.
joke to me. They were like, did you
You
actually get through? And I wasn't even insulted because I was like, I know it's so weird. But it was just on that scale, it just gave me wings. So that was like weird, sort of physiological effects of that whole
I
time
think
period.
I think it's amazing though, because I think there's so many conversations I've had when you talk about that experience of getting your deal. Very rarely have I heard that story of the adrenaline rush. Sometimes it's their own, like they're glad they've got the deal. Like I'm glad I've been working hard for this for so long. Other times it's like me, you're a bit stunned that it's happened. You're just okay. We're just taking it step by step, like very pragmatic about it. But having that, I'm on a roller coaster. I can't breathe. I've got memory
I'm
loss.
free.
I don't know
I'm
what's
having so
happening.
much fun. Like, woo! Yeah, that's exactly what it was like.
But in a way, that's
That's
how it
right.
should be because you work so, being a writer, very rarely is it that you decide, you wake up one morning and decide, I'm going to write a book. You just write a book and then you get the success. It's a build up. And for some people, it's a
Absolutely.
build up they've had since childhood. For others, maybe a teenager or just early adulthood. Or maybe, I get into, I'm now 40. I want to write a book and I've been wanting to write a book for years. I'm now going to write my book. But there's been some kind of emotional, mental build up. You don't just do it overnight.
Yeah.
So I suppose it's not surprising then there's just this reaction, whether it's a physical reaction at the end of it, because all that energy has to go somewhere, I think, and in
Yes.
some form.
Exactly. No, I totally agree. Can I ask you, how was the sort of the second book experience for you, and just after the
Oh,
big sort of burst, like the experience of sort of finding your stability after that?
I think my second book, it was different because I wrote the second book entirely in lockdown. So
Mm,
I in a way, it probably was a good thing I was kind of away from everything. And but in the bad thing was, the sad thing about it was that I wasn't able to go out and promote the debut book because I was in lockdown. So I
Yeah,
couldn't do anything like physical in real
yeah,
life until I think it was maybe July, from July onwards. So writing that second book, it was just me in this room writing this writing the book. So in a way, once I'd got my head around, okay, this is how you write a second book, you know your story, I just got on with it. And then I suppose with promotion, then promoting it was different because then I was out. And it's like, oh, this is what it's like to talk to people and talk about the books and the characters. And that made it exciting. But I don't know what the experience would have been if I'd been out physically in the real world for the first book and the second book without having that
yeah,
COVID pandemic gap. So that kind of made it
yeah,
a bit different.
yeah, yeah. I wrote The Quiet Tenant in, well, I certainly started it in lockdown, and I
Mm,
remember like it was actually strangely, I mean, it was an awful time, but similarly, like I think I just channeled all my angst into it,
yeah,
you know?
there's nothing else to do with your
Yeah,
angst.
also it
Drink
was
wine
incredible. Like,
and write.
yeah, there was nothing else to do. It was kind of incredible from that regard. Like, I look back on my schedule because I was still working full time, and I was like, well,
Mm,
I would work on the book from 8 to 9, log on to my job from 9 to 5:30, 6, 7, and
yeah,
then work on the book again for another hour. And I still had time left in the day because there was nothing going on.
no,
Wild.
there was nothing to travel to. Did you have to? Can we talk about rejection a lot on this
Yes,
podcast?
talk about
But
rejection.
yeah, how did you manage it? Because I'm thinking, because I don't know if the rejection, I don't know if it would be different if you're submitting directly to publishers when you was writing your first book. The rejection's still
Yeah,
there. It's just not coming from a middleman, I suppose.
yeah, I mean, I feel like rejection has just been a constant in my life. Um, and it which is in practice less dire than it sounds when I say it that way, but I mean, I think when you're a writer, it is just something that happens, and rejection is
Mm,
just a natural byproduct of trying. And
yeah,
um I feel like I've experienced it on every scale, small, big, personal, professional. Um, it just is a thing that happens. It doesn't feel great when it happens, but um, hopefully you kind of get to a point where you can handle it mentally, and also you have enough sort of irons in the fire that not everything hinges on one thing.
yeah,
With my French book, a lot of the rejections were just silence, because when you're sending your own book to publishers, usually you just like kind of don't hear back if they don't want it. So but actually that was painful sometimes. um the one, yeah, that can hurt. And then, I always say, being on sub, so like for people listening to us, when your agent takes your manuscript to editors at publishing houses and submits it, that's called being on submission, and it
yeah,
is, in my experience, the most trying time in your professional life. um because at any point you might get the email that like someone is
yeah,
interested, but also a no is faster than a yes. And so the no's come first, and there are always no's. And even the people, it's a matter of perspective, even the people who get the absolute fairy tale with like an auction with like 16 houses, well, they probably went on sub to 20 or 25 houses, so it
yeah.
means, it
I
means
saw the list.
multiple. Hmm?
Yeah, I saw my agent sat down with me before we went out on sub, and he showed me his list, his handwritten
Yes.
list of the publishers he was going to submit the Jigsaw Man to. And let's say there were
Yeah.
20 of them. So I think maybe 7 were in an auction. So yeah, so 7 came back
Right,
out of the
exactly.
20. So it's 13 rejections.
Exactly. Right. Like even the fairy tale involves
Mm,
multiple rejections. And I think once you understand that, it just gives you a helpful perspective. But I mean, of
yeah.
course, like I've cried over professional rejections. Like I have just been sad. And sometimes it's okay to just feel sad. Like I find that the emotions are just less daunting when I put a name on them and accept them,
Yeah.
and you know allow them to be. It's like, yes, I am sad because something saddening just happened. It's like, oh well, yes, of course. And so just process it, um, and then persevere.
Mm. So how did you manage the success of the Quiet Tenant when it happened? Because then when it happened, it seemed like it to me on my side of the ocean and seeing all the reviews, like, wow, this book has appeared and it's everywhere and it's amazing and I want to read it and it's not like anything I've heard before. And then you hear you've been optioned as well, so you know it's going to be made, whether it's TV and film. So how do you manage all that success when it happened? When it does seem to happen so quickly.
Well, the good thing with writing behind the scenes, it happens incrementally.
Yeah.
So, and I'm sure, like, right? Like, you start working on it, you work on it for however much time it takes you. You
Mm.
go on sub, you get the deal, you're in edits, and then there's still like a year before it comes out. And so then it comes out, it comes out. And then I find that success is built sometimes, and this was the case for this book, like in the medium to long term. So like it's like people kept reading it, and like a year after it came
Mm.
out people were still reading it. It was kind of built over time. And then yeah, the option deal was like such a happy time for me. And the good thing is it happens bit by bit.
It's
And
built,
so I
you can
kind
build on it.
Yes,
Mm.
you wrap your head around one thing, and this way you're prepared when the next thing happens. But it was great. I mean, honestly, like I enjoyed it.
I think you have to. It's so hard, this journey, and there's so much going on. And also, like, writing is sometimes like the easy part of this whole journey. When you have to go out and maybe if you're doing, you're doing the festivals, you're doing appearances, you're doing tours, it takes so much out of you on a different level. So you need to enjoy those moments.
Yeah, you know what? I think that's very wise. I was actually just thinking a big thing for me is to enjoy not just the like big professional thing, but also the moments that come with
Mm.
them. So, because I do think you can choose joy, but I think you kind of like catch happiness as it is in the air
Yeah.
around you. And I think happiness is in moments. And it those moments where the big stuff gets crystallized into an instant, um, are the ones I latch onto. And usually they're like odd little moments sometimes, but I can tell you when Our Last Resort came out, this is a perfect example what for me of what it's like. When Our Last Resort came out in the US, it hit the USA Today bestsellers list in its first week, and I was deliriously happy about that. I was relieved, I was thrilled, I was so grateful. And I was like feeling all these feelings, and I was on tour, and I drove myself to Saratoga Springs here in the state of New York for a tour stop. And on the way I stopped to have lunch in a service area on the side of the highway, and I had Burger King. They had because I'm a vegetarian, and Burger King here has the Impossible Whopper, which is, in my opinion, the top fast food choice for vegetarians here. And honestly, the fries were hot and salty, and the burger was perfect, and the service area was relatively quiet, and I had a table to myself, and my book was on the bestsellers list. And in that
It's a
moment,
moment.
everything was good. It was great. The weather was beautiful. It was a beautiful summer day. There was no traffic yet. And in that moment, everything was perfect. This was a moment of happiness. And so I think that's how I enjoy success. You just have to find the
Yeah.
moments when everything
It
crystallizes.
I think it's so true because there's been moments, especially in the summer, like I love the summer, and just going
Hmm.
for me, like doing a walk in the morning. I might have had like a stressful writing day the day before, and I've gotten up, gone for a walk, and I've seen, the sun is out, the sky is blue, and I've just stopped by the river, and I'm just, this is the perfect moment. Like everything is right in the
Yeah,
world, and I'm doing a good thing. I'm doing what I want to do, and I'm doing it
yeah,
well. And so you take
yeah.
joy in small moments. So that's really
Exactly.
cool.
I think that's very, very wise. And I think that's the only way to do it is to have those moments where you appreciate what's around you. And also you stop and you're like, let's zoom out for a second. Let's look at my
Mm.
life. I had this moment this morning, actually. I was running and there's a lake slash reservoir next to where I live. And it's in the woods. And I run alone in the woods, which, like, if you read my book, sounds counterintuitive.
And now I'm thinking
And
it all kind of makes sense. I wasn't going to ask where do you get your inspiration from, but I'm like, well, Clemence is running in the woods in their lakes. I'm like, all of this makes sense now.
yeah, I just run by myself in the woods. And I was like, but it's just so beautiful. And I was like, this is a great moment, and I'm lucky to be able to do all of this. I'm lucky to be able to
Yeah.
just be here and have all of this in my head, and I'm happy.
It's nice to have conversations like this because a lot of time, and it's just the way of the world. Not everyone's publishing and writing journeys going to be. I'm not saying perfect's not the right word, but it's not going to be perfect. But it's nice to have conversations where you can celebrate the joy in the moments that you have, and you can sense the excitement that you have around your work
Yeah.
and what's happening and all the opportunities.
Oh, there's never any shortage of stuff to worry about. That's
Yeah, that's
like that's for sure. I mean, I worry about everything all the time. But every once in a while, whether I'm running or having a burger,
having your
just
Burger King.
if I can. Oh my god, it was a perfect moment.
It's always those moments. My moment this morning was sitting down and eating a cinnamon roll, and I was like, "Oh, I love it." A cinnamon. It was like, I just love it. And it was warm, and I was like, "This is a good moment." I have nothing to do today except have my conversation with Clemence. I'm like, "This is a good moment."
This is a good moment. And but I think that's very important also to just find those moments we can treasure that don't depend on, you know, someone publishing the book or like an email or an
Yeah.
answer. Like it's great to be able to have sort of joy you can make happen.
No,
It's a very important part of, yeah, managing those
I think
feelings,
you
I think.
I think you need it though, and you need to know how to manage it because I said this job that we've chosen, it's a lot. You put so much of yourself into it. And always
Mhm.
it's what we've always said as writers, like there's no guarantee. Like you can spend a year, 2 years writing a book, and there's no guarantee at the end of it that maybe your publisher may want it, or even if they do want it and it doesn't sell that well, it might sink like a stone in a
Yeah,
lake, or it might soar. There's just no guarantees, and you just have to take each day as it comes.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Mm. Are you working on the TV on the film adaptations, or are you just
Yes,
staying
so
clear with it?
no, no, I'm involved. I'm very lucky in that regard. So, The Quiet Tenant and Our Last Resort have both been
Mm,
optioned for TV by Blumhouse, a production company behind like Megan
yeah,
and why am I blanking on and Get Out. There you go.
yeah.
And many, many other great, great movies and TV shows. And and I'm attached as an executive producer on both adaptations. And that is another part of this journey that sort of surpassed the dream. It
Mm.
was the part that I didn't dare dream about because it just, before anything happened, it just seemed like such a long shot. And I knew some people got adaptation deals, but I didn't know how it worked. And I knew it was difficult. And honestly, I have been so lucky to work with really talented people, very creative, very great creative partners. I've just really enjoyed that part of the journey.
What have you had this? I don't know if this is a weird question, but what have you had to teach yourself about the industry? Because there's so you can only learn so much, from what you may find out online and talking to other authors. But what have you learned yourself from this journey?
You mean specifically the adaptation or everything?
Just everything.
Everything. Oh my goodness.
Mm,
That's the thing. So I am someone like there's this now late editor called Robert Gottlieb, who was at one point the head of my U.S. publishing house, Knopf, and he, in his autobiography, his memoir, he says, "Nothing is real to me until I read about it, and
yeah.
nothing is real to me until I compulsively learn everything I can about it." And I just, when something big happens to me, I just read everything I can. I
Yeah.
just like, so I went through phases of just reading books about, the writer's life and publishing and how it works, and book deals and adaptations and all that stuff. And eventually the great thing is you kind of retain the knowledge that is useful to you, and then you kind of let go of the rest.
Yeah.
And for me, one thing I'm learning is, for a long for my first two books, I was an author who was very in touch with, like, numbers and just the business aspect of things,
Yeah.
because it felt important, because it was a professional transition for me. So I had to know how I was doing, like, how am I doing from a
Mm.
business point of view? Because, you know, I was making decisions such as, should I go freelance as a journalist so that I have more time to dedicate to the books? Well, does that make financial sense? Yes, no. You're going to have a lot of numbers in your head to make those big life decisions. Or I would
Yeah.
at least recommend taking a little look see um, before
You need
making.
to know your balance.
You need to know your balance. um, and eventually, though, I realized that um, I'm at a point right now where it's more productive for me to focus on the big picture in terms of,
Mm.
like, just how am I doing as a business, because like when you're a freelancer, you're kind of your own business.
Yeah.
um Big picture is good enough. I know my balance. I have some kind of a plan in place, but I have found that I'm a little less laser focused on all the sort of external indicators, all the numbers, because it kind of got to a point where it was just feeding my anxiety.
Yeah.
And those parts of my brain that were like, my mind can't wander if it's just running through my anxieties all the
Mm.
time. And mine needs to wander in order for me to be able to do my job. So I have, like, sort of freed myself a little bit from that. So that's a thing I've learned. I've taught myself.
I remember when I got my deal, and then the first question from like my friends was, "When are you leaving your job?" What do you mean, when am I leaving my job? This is not how it works. I can't. I didn't get a seven-figure deal. I can't just leave my job as a lawyer. I still
No,
need to work, and then
I
I had to
know.
think
And even
about the plan.
I know, and it's funny because when you think about it, because I've done it to other friends too. Before I was myself a writer, I did it to other friends, and now I look
Yeah,
back and I'm like, I understand, but even if you got a massive, massive deal, it's still one deal. You're gonna have to support
yeah,
yourself for many years after. It's not just, do you have a deal? It's, do you have a career? And that's a question that
exactly.
doesn't get answered right away.
Did you ever think about that in the early days? But I don't know if you do when you're just, you're writing that first book, if you're thinking about the career aspect of it.
When I was writing, no, I didn't think about that. When I was publishing, I was like, let's see where this goes. Like, it was on
Yeah.
my mind, when I was working on the edits for the Quiet Tenant and everything happened with the foreign rights. I was like, let's see. And then I stayed
Mm.
at my job. Like, I was very much still at my job when the Quiet Tenant came out, and it was last year that I decided to leave, mainly because I loved my job. Actually, I miss I miss the job. I love journalism. I
Yeah.
want to do more of it as a freelancer. I just keep the books take up a lot of time, but I loved my job and I loved writing the books, but trying to do everything all at once made everything too stressful.
Yeah.
And, nothing was joyful anymore. Nothing was fun. I mean, nothing was fun. That's an
No,
exaggeration. I still had
no,
fun and it was still joyful, but yeah.
but you overthink it, because I remember a time when, for me, I say being a lawyer, doing that full time and writing novels, and then doing it's the other stuff outside the writing, the novels, the social aspect of it, and trying to. I couldn't compartmentalize myself and give myself. I couldn't give 100% to each compartment. Like something would have to give, and that's a lot to
100%.
to consider. Yeah.
Exactly. I realized that I had managed to find time to both work full time and write, but I
Mm.
don't have time to work full time, write, and be an author. which is a
Yeah,
public facing. You know, you're a writer and you're an author. And the public facing part, like it does take up room. And it's not just even enough hours in the day, it's enough mental energy. Like I
yeah.
just because it fits in the calendar doesn't mean my brain can keep up with it, you know? And so it got to the
That
point when I was working on the big thing in journalism, the books would fall by the wayside and then vice versa. And so it was just hard.
I think that is always like the most surprising thing about being a, I say being a writer is learning that there's a difference between being a writer and being an author, and how and it's true. Like I can give 100% to the lawyer job when I had it. I can give 100% to the writing, but I couldn't give 100% to being an author once it started to take off, because it's a lot and it's and you said you can fill the gap in your diary. I'm like, oh, I've got space, I can do an event here,
Mhm.
but it's like the mental build up to it and then the come down from it and then preparing yourself physically and emotionally for whatever you've got coming next. That's what takes up all the energy.
Yes. Do you also need like a little like buffer period after an event? Like you like
Oh
to
god,
kind of
yeah.
level up?
I
Yeah.
need a I've taken a buffer month. I'm off for
Yeah.
August. I'm not doing because I'm like I'm
Yes.
tired and I'm like I need a break and it's a lot.
Yeah, it is a lot. How do you
Yeah.
balance now both being a lawyer and a writer? What does your balance look like?
Because I'm not doing the lawyer anymore. So
Okay.
I don't
Yeah.
practice. Yeah, I don't practice. I still do freelance teaching, like occasionally at
Okay.
the law school. So that keeps me, because I like being out. Like when you're writing all the time and being in this space, it's nice to be out and see people and meet people. But I still don't think I could have done it well if I was I know I couldn't have done it if I was practicing full time, because I was doing trials, because I'm a criminal lawyer doing, they'll say, you know, trial attorney, and that takes up so much mental space outside of the act of just doing a trial during the working day. It's just like being a writer. It's like the preparation before and there's the come down after, and then sometimes there's back to back trials. It's a lot. It's a lot.
Oh my God, I can't imagine because that's a whole different level of
Yeah.
responsibility.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
You know, we
before I
have
go on,
I
so go on. Mhm.
sorry, no, no, go ahead.
No, no, go, go.
I am a law school dropout.
Are, are
I
you now?
you did very good.
What what made you say no? What made you go, this
I
is not
just
for me?
I just really wanted to be a journalist, actually. It wasn't like a problem with the law or anything, but I failed to get into journalism school the first time I applied. And because of a weirdness in how my French university worked, I was able to get into the law program no problem, even though I couldn't get into the journalism one.
Wow.
Because they were like, there's only so many journalists the market can absorb every year. So that was capped. So
Yeah.
you had to like be admitted. And they were like, lawyers, we need plenty. So come right in. And so I did 1 year of the 2 year program. And then I was, so I did it for a year and I was like, I could see a life there, but I still really want to be a journalist. I'd wanted to be a journalist for years. And I was like, I'm going to give it another go. And I got into the journalism
Yeah.
program. So that's why I switched. But my favorite subject was criminal law.
Criminal law's the best. It's the best.
Yeah.
When I start, before we go into the last our last resort, when I started in my head I wanted to do like media law. That's what I just wanted to do,
Hmm.
media law. And then I got into law school and I did the criminal module and I was like, no, this is
Hmm.
exciting. And then I still joined a firm where I worked I was in the media department dealing with film finance, but it was like, no, this doesn't sing to me. This is not my calling. So criminal law,
Yeah,
less money, but it was what I wanted. Gave me joy in a weird way.
that's important. That's important.
So, Clemence, would you like to tell the listeners about Our Last Resort, your second book?
Yes. Our Last Resort tells the story of Frida and Gabriel, two adults who travel to a beautiful but very isolated hotel in the desert in Utah. And they go there to try to mend their sibling relationship. Everything is going well enough, not perfectly well, but okay, until a few days into their stay, a female guest turns up dead, evidently murdered. And the criminal investigation is going to quickly focus on Gabriel because it's not the first time a woman has died in his orbit. Frida and Gabriel share a particular kind of bond because they grew up in a cult together in upstate New York. So the novel is told in dual timelines. One timeline spans days and follows the murder investigation at the hotel and its impact on our characters. And the other timeline spans years and years and follows their past in the cult and the fallout from that.
When I read the blurb, 'cause I haven't got my copy yet, but when I read the blurb, I was like, oh my god, I want to see. Because I have brothers, so when you think about siblings, I'm like, my sibling relationship is fine. So it makes you think when you read stories about sibling relationships and something might not be right, you're thinking, no, but I'm lucky, I'm okay. My sibling
I'm okay.
relationship's
Yeah.
good.
Oh my God. So many times I like watch movies or read books where people get into like impossible situations. And I'm like, oh, I'm so glad that's not me.
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad we're normal. So glad we're
Yeah.
normal. So I have two questions to ask you about the book. So, did you face any challenges in writing our last resort?
Any challenges? Um, I mean, it was intense writing it
Mm,
because I was still working full time. And as we just like talked about, I was working full time, but I was already published. And so I was doing a full time job, writer and author. So that was a bit of a challenge.
yeah.
And also, I went into writing Our Last Resort and deciding to do dual timelines with an incredible amount of naivete, which I think is needed to start anything. Because if you knew how hard it's going to be, you wouldn't start anything. So I was like, yeah, we'll just do it. We'll just do a dual timelines. It's going to be great. And it turns out writing dual timelines is really hard, like in a satisfying way, but it was really like something I had to learn to do.
Yeah.
But I was lucky. I was glad because I like to stretch myself as a writer, but like you have to write the adults that would grow out of these children and then the children who would turn into these adults. It sounds obvious, but it had not crossed
Mm,
my mind when I started it.
I always, whenever I finished a book, especially like my third book, and I had flashbacks, it wasn't necessarily a dual timeline situation, but there were
Mhm.
numerous flashbacks to 1995 and 1996, and then we flash forward to present day. And at the end of that book, The Kill List, I said to myself, I am never, especially when I was getting my copy edits back, or just my edits back full stop. And I said, I'm never doing anything involving timelines at all, because it's the challenge of working out the timelines when you're doing the edits and making things sure they correspond and they make sense. And so even with the last book I've just written, I thought, no, timelines aren't going to be a problem. Edits come back, first thing in my edits letter, we need to sort out the timeline. I'm like, no,
No, not the timeline again.
not the timeline. So this time I'm like, I'm going to
Oh,
write a book with no timeline. Don't know how I'm going to do that. But I just want to.
I, I don't know if you're the same way, but I went through a phase where I would convince myself, I'm like, next book, I'm going to simplify it 80,000 words, one
Yeah,
perspective, present
yeah.
time. And like, no, that's just not who I am as a writer. It's always like multiple timelines, multiple points of view, multiple, like,
It's
like
like
perspectives.
we need the drama as a writer, both in the
Mhm.
writing and as in literally in the act of writing. So
Yeah. But I can't resist jumping around. Like people are so interesting. I want to get into everyone's heads
it
and I want to
is.
get to know people like my characters throughout their lives when they're at their weirdest.
Well, talking about your characters, this is my next question about your book. So, if you could spend an afternoon with any of your characters from Our Last Resort, whom would you choose and why?
Ooh. Okay, I without it reflecting anything on like the story or its outcome or anything like that, um I would spend an afternoon with Gabriel because he is a big Roman Empire nerd. And and I studied Latin for 8 years between middle school and university. And I enjoy hearing about the Latin language and the Roman Empire and Roman civilization. And so I would like to have a mocktail because Gabriel is sober, and just talk about Rome. I think that would be an okay way to spend an afternoon.
You're having a geek fest with Gabriel.
Yes, having a geek fest. But the reason I made the reason I made him a Roman Empire nerd is because he was one of those characters who was a little hard for me to get to know. He was kind of a
Yeah.
cipher for a bit of a long time. And that's very interesting to me when a character is that way. And I know I can't rush it. Just let them come to me. It will always happen, but so when that happens, I usually give this character a characteristic that I share just to kind of create a little window into their minds
Yeah.
that I can look into. So the Roman stuff with Gabriel, that's where it came from.
Characters are it's such an interesting thing, writing question, because similar to what you were saying, it's like you having to get to know them. And with my new book, well, the book that's going to come out next year, there's a character in there, and I had her, but I didn't know her. I didn't really know
Hmm.
what motivated her. I knew what her acts were going to be. So I knew what she was going to do within the book, but I didn't know what
Yeah,
motivated her. And
yeah,
I had to just sit there and I'll just wait for it to come to me. And it came to me
yeah.
watching a
Also,
show. I was watching TV and I was like, oh, that's her.
yes. Oh my God, I love when that happens. I was on just yesterday. I flew back from a quick trip to Portugal,
Mm.
and I am working on my next novel. And I had this character, and there was one aspect about him that I couldn't figure out. I just couldn't. And it was really important too. And I was like, I really should
Yeah.
be thinking of something right now. Like, come on, I'm almost at the end of the first draft. Like, we got to get there. And I was reading magazines in Portugal, French magazines, and I read an interview by an actress, and I was like, there it is. The thing I was looking for. And it's not that I like stole it, I didn't borrow it like
No.
wholesale, but just there was one little detail in it that stayed with me, and then my
Yeah.
imagination did the rest. And I just wrote it down in my notes app. I That's my favorite part of the work. I
Your notes.
love when, you know, like, yeah. But I
I've
love when you
learned to
know
love
enough
it.
about your was that?
So I've learned to love it, the notes app.
Mm. Oh yeah. I wouldn't do anything without the notes app. But I love when you know just enough to know your characters, you know what you don't know, and so you're able to kind
Yeah.
of look for it. I
Yeah.
like that stage.
That's the thing. You don't need to know. I didn't need to know everything, because sometimes they come to you as you write the story and as you go through. Maybe not necessarily the first draft. Maybe when you're doing the second draft and even the third draft. But sometimes it's just this little component, this little